Yeah, look, the question I really want to answer today is, I guess when we started doing all this soil amelioration stuff, big time in terms of the big one-off sort of cultivation events, we were saying, we reckon it's going to last 10 years or more. Well, I'm here to tell you that I reckon it will, and I'm going to try and convince you that the benefits will last 10 years, I guess, under the right circumstances. But more important... Where am I? Yep, okay. But more importantly, for those of you interested in making an offer on the Pulsar, this is the old girl. I've had it for about, I was the second owner, and we've had it for about 14 years. And as I say, it's done over 350,000 Ks for a 4-cylinder. No mechanical problem whatsoever, except the aircon broke down almost as soon as I got to Geraldton. So it's become our second car now, but there are some hot drives to work. It was one of the last of the Aussie-built Nissans before Nissan pulled out back in about 93. And it does have this famous motor that was in the Triple S, but the Q had the same motor but with more comfortable suspension. So yep, all offers considered. But no, look, the thing is, I've been able to do a long-term test on this car. I've been able to drive it around for 14 years, and I can tell you now that if you could go back to 1991, this is a really good car to buy. It won the Car of the Year in 91, and it was worth it. It was built to a quality, not down to a price like they are now. And I guess that's really what I want to sort of lead in with today, is to say, I'll give you the results today of a long-term trial, and we can say all we like at the start of these things, but the reality is sometimes we've just got to actually do the hard yards and do the years and test whether these things really are going to live up to it over time. So, this experiment we started in 2007. Newms and I did it sort of jointly between our projects. Obviously Newms was interested in integrated the weed management side of things, plus he just loves ploughing. And then I was interested in obviously the soil amelioration. So back in 2007, these are the only treatments that have been done over the course of what I'm going to tell you. So obviously we had the control. We whacked surface lime on at 2 tonnes per hectare. We were being a bit timid with the rate. We multiple ploughed with our little 3-furrow plough there. And so that little plough compared to the grower ploughs, its operating depth is about 10 centimetres less than what your big grower ploughs would be. So that they would be tending to plough at about 35 centimetres. This little guy's ploughing at about 25 centimetres. So when I'm talking about the ploughing, I'm really just talking about incorporation. Don't get hung up over the tool. Don't get, it has to be a mobile plough that you do this with. That's not it at all, because really we were just doing a bit of a cultivation to 25 centimetres, and yes, it was just enough of inversion to get weed control, but really when you look at the profile now, once everything's settled down, we basically just mixed the top 20. And then we had some lime treatments in conjunction with the ploughing. So we either put the 2 tonne up front and ploughed, put the 2 tonne after, or we split that 1 tonne before, 1 tonne after. So I want to actually jump ahead straight away and look at the 2013 wheat grain yield results, and it'll become clear why I've jumped ahead. But this is, I guess, when things started to get really, really exciting, almost a bit too exciting for Newms. But so you can see here we've just basically got the 2013 wheat yields and our treatments going across, and it's a pretty simple story. It's beautiful data. And your control and your 2 tonnes of surface lime in that year both yielded 2.8. There was a 300 kilo yield response to the multiple ploughing on its own, but then when we had lime in the mix, we jump up to half a tonne yield response. So that's like an 18%, nearly a 20% yield increase from having those two things in combination. In addition to that, we actually got grain protein increase of 1 to 1.5%, so a significant grain protein increase for these guys out here. Our screenings were lower and our kernel weights were heavier. So we've got a happier crop here, and it showed up. So that was a really good result, and it was really good that 7 years 7 seasons rather, after the treatments were done, we get this really nice response. I can't help it, I've got to say it, just look at the error bars on this thing for a field trial. This is 4 replicates, and look at those error bars. I've just never come across a site like it. I just love it. Now we jump to 2014, and I thought the grower was just going to do their loop and wheat thing, but I went out there and he'd actually sown the site to barley. And I must acknowledge the growers here, because they're the ones that sort of, when we were getting a bit despondent about the site at times, they were the ones that saying, come out, keep measuring, keep having a look at it. And then, so when I went out this last year, wow, that's not as clear as it is on there. You could see these ridges of barley going through the trial, and these were matching up exactly with the Moldboard plough and lime incorporation treatments. So it was just, again, consistent across every rep. There were just these bumps going across the paddock, and we just thought, we're in for a ripper here. And the weed difference was very, very stark as well. So when we actually look at the pH coming down this 8 seasons later, this is obviously one of the key drivers of what's going on at this site. So as I said, it was only lime once. It was only lime with 2 tonnes per hectare of lime sand, which Chris will tell me off afterwards because we haven't put enough on, and he's dead right. And you can see these are the results. So just to try and keep it really simple, in terms of your topsoil, here's your control pH sitting here. But through the action of Moldboard ploughing without adding any lime, obviously that's declined because we've brought that subsoil up. I should note that my subsoil target arrow, I forgot to move it. It's meant to be here at 4.8. So Chris, don't tell me off about that one because I've acknowledged it. It's wrong. So the subsoil target is here at 4.8. So all these guys are above. As you go down this profile, that's where your problems are really strong, because we've basically just got from 10 to 40 centimetres, we've basically just got 4.4, 4.3 in the subsoil pHs, so we've got a real problem there. In terms of the topsoil, those treatments that ended up with lime, the 2 tonnes of lime on the surface are above the topsoil target of 5.5. So in reality, everything should have, even if it had lime put under, it should have had the 2 tonne put on top to get us above the target so that we can still keep stuff moving down. What is interesting here is that the lime where it's just been put on the surface, we've actually got a nice increase in the 10 to 20 pH. So we're actually getting up to that target of 4.8 in that 10 to 20 centimetre layer. But one thing I think it pays to bear in mind is the guys that farm this place, they're on narrow row spacings. They love their crop competition, so they're on 7-inch row spacing, and they work with knife point 6 inches deep, and they go about 12 k's an hour. This is not minimum till. So this lime that was put on the surface has actually been mixed down into the top part of that 10 to 20 centimetre layer. And I suspect that and time and, a reasonable rainfall area. Sorry, I didn't tell you where the trial was. Just north of Mingenew, a place they call the Casuarinas. Reasonable rainfall area, and that's actually done the job here. So in terms of what happens then, obviously the treatments that were ploughed but had some lime added, they're a bit higher here, but they're actually obviously got a greater increase in the subsoil. So we've actually incorporated that lime, and we've done a reasonable job here at the 10 to 20, and we've made a little bit of a dent in 20 to 30, but we've got nothing below that, and that's the point about it being a shallower working plough coming through there, and the fact that we haven't put enough lime on. So going through to those barley yields, the picture that you saw earlier, but a bit not very clear on the screen. Obviously, seeing such lovely visuals, we knew that we were going to be in for something good. And what happened here was obviously our control yield is 2.6 tonnes per hectare. Our yield with it, because this was a sensitive barley crop variety, sorry. We did get this sort of 400 kilo yield response to either surface liming or moldboard ploughing on its own, but then we get this massive jump where we've done the two things together. So beautiful interaction, and you can see that we've basically got a tonne of extra yield there, so a 38% yield increase. The paddock average, just to let you know, we actually chose a really good part of the paddock. We've got this lovely consistent site, and it is a poorer bit of the paddock, but the paddock average was around 3.1. So I guess, going and telling the growers, well, we got 3.6 in this part of the paddock sort of has been a wake-up call for them, and they're obviously pouring the lime on and still thinking about what incorporation they might use. But it's been a bit of a good convincer, this trial. So the other thing we measured was we took some plant harvest index cuts, and I employed a wonderful lady on a casual basis, Virginia, up at Geraldton. She spent way too many weeks separating out barley and ryegrass, and we came up with these numbers for ryegrass biomass. So a lot of work, but great numbers. Numi said that these numbers gave him a chubby, but I don't actually know what that means because I'm too innocent. But apparently, I think it means he was excited. So we've got over half a tonne of ryegrass biomass. Sorry, Nubes. Half a tonne of ryegrass biomass for the control. As soon as we add this surface lime, we're down to, about 260, 280. And Chris has shown those wonderful results before from long-term lime trial sites. And I think we need to keep hammering on about the fact that lime's not just about the soil and pH, but it's about weed control too, which is obviously generally ranks as the biggest constraint for anyone, especially in the north. The moldboard ploughing has still had a benefit in terms of weed control. It's not quite as impressive as some of them on its own. And I mean, remember, this is a relatively small plot trial. So these plots that have been treated back in 2007 have been sitting alongside plots and an entire paddock that hasn't been treated. So it's not like there isn't seed incursions into this thing. And so it's obviously about something a bit more than just burying that weed seed initially. Obviously that helped, getting that weed seed bank low in these areas, but we definitely would have had seed coming into there despite our best efforts to minimise that. And then you can obviously see here that once we actually, again, put the two things together, we're talking about a 75% decrease in that ryegrass biomass. And I mean, obviously crop competition is a really important part of what's driven this response here. But potentially there is something still there in terms of herbicide efficacy. This site has mild to moderate repellents. You do see it. It doesn't tend to show up in the establishment, but that doesn't mean that that repellence isn't having an impact on the availability of nutrients at that site, and doesn't mean it isn't having an impact on the productivity. So we certainly, at this site, we certainly have, reasonable subsoils in terms of a little bit more clay content, and the repellence is basically fixed up to a degree here. So yeah, look, it's all pretty good. And if we sort of look at the returns across there, this will sort of explain a little bit about what happened in the early years of the trial. So we sort of jump back in time a little bit here. So in the first year, the ploughing actually happened late. The rest of the paddock had been sown, so the ploughed areas actually had to have a cover crop later. And so there's obviously no real response there in terms of that barley in the first year. In the second year, I thought I'd be smart and go for a responsive crop, and we got the little cone seeder to run across seeding canola, which was a disaster in terms of seeding depth control. And we probably, in our ignorance, probably touched it up with pre-emergence as well, which we're finding more and more is a very sensitive issue after ameliorating these soils. After that, in 2009, we measured all the plots again, including the lime treatments. but there was actually just a response to moldboarding. There still wasn't this lime response coming through. So even though we'd done the right thing and we'd incorporated the lime, it still wasn't there quickly. And then I guess, we had 3 years where we didn't actually measure every plot. We just measured bulk moldboard versus not, because that seemed to be where the action was. That's what we could afford, and that's what the easiest thing to do was at the time with the busyness of other things we were doing. And what we just kept seeing was that we were getting this around about a 300 kilo yield response each time we had cereals, but every time we jumped into the lupins, there was basically no response. Then in 2013, Bob, one of the farmers there, to his credit, rang me up and said, "You need to look at that lime trial again properly. It's been so long and it's going into wheat this year. Now's your chance." And bless Bob, because that's where we saw obviously that half a tonne yield return. And obviously, so we'd had these starting to pay for the operation of the ploughing, more than pay for the operation of the ploughing if we ignore the negative there. And then we've obviously seen, in terms of these red bars, these are the total returns coming through for the liming. So obviously over the last 2 years, that's started to arc up. So if we look at the total net present value for the treatments over the life of the trial, we've got about a $300 return to the moldboard ploughing, and just in 2 years we're up to about 130 odd, 120, 130 odd dollars return for the liming. So, will these soil amelioration benefits last more than 10 years? Yep, I reckon they will, because obviously we've started to fix the soil pH profile. I think one of the things that's exciting for me about this is that we haven't done a very good job of fixing that pH profile. We fixed it down to 20 centimetres, and yet we've seen half a tonne of wheat and a tonne of extra barley grain. What if we'd actually fixed it to 50 centimetres? We're obviously still way off our potential yield, so there's a lot more fun to be had here. And so I reckon it's not over yet, especially once I lime the back half of it again with a healthy rate. I reckon we'll still see some really good results coming through. And the reality is, if you start to hit multiple constraints at once, if you start to deal with, I should have mentioned, which I forgot to, that in 2014 they ripped the whole paddock. So that yield response that you see to the barley, the 1 tonne, everything had been ripped. They really ripped the beggery out of it, so it was a really good ripping job. So, a lot of that, any compaction difference that may have somehow survived, even though I know the wheel track's there, and I think the compaction would have been pretty even over the whole site. Any benefits of the ripping effect would be well and truly gone, plus it all got taken out that year. But if we sort of start to hit multiple constraints in terms of dealing with some water repellents, getting on top of our weeds and giving ourselves a better opportunity to have crop competition and control weeds, the biggie is if we fix the pH, to be honest. It is a massive driver in all this. And if we deal with compaction by taking it out and then control traffic, the reality is 10 years will be easy. The benefits for 10 years will be easy. It'll just be how long after that. But I mean, as we've seen, as Chris and others have shown, to be honest, if you get that pH right and you keep it right, you're not going to be losing yield from that point on for that reason. So I think the implications are, look, soil testing isn't expensive. It is hard in some places, but it's not hard on sand, which I deal with a lot. So look, do the soil test to 40 centimetres. On sand, even go to 50, just to make sure you're seeing whether that pH profile is coming back up again. Look, do the comprehensive soil analyses. I mean, the reality is on some of these sands, we do get P and K moving down. And if you're going to go to an incorporation event, you actually want to know whether the subsoil you're bringing up, has it actually got a bit of P in it already, or is it, totally low, and you're really going to have to go sort of in with new land rates and things to make sure everything's okay. And I mean, my other advice at the moment is, if people are umming and ahhing about incorporation, do I use offsets? Do I use a one-way plough? Do I use a spader? Do I use a moldboard? There's a whole lot of reasons and other factors that come into that decision. But if you're undecided and you don't want to take the plunge yet, you want to hang on a bit longer, still apply the lime if you need it. Just get it on there as quickly as you can. I mean, we all know it, but that's the reality. Just get that on. The incorporation can come later, it doesn't matter, but get the lime on if you need it and get it at the rates you need it and do that. In terms of the incorporation, look, test the methods, have a crack, get contractors in with a few different things, have a look at what it does, have a look at the issues. There's a lot of agronomic issues, there's a lot of things you've got to deal with, but it's capacity to test it. It's the easiest way of getting a feel, and if you're in that undecided zone, it's the easiest way of getting a feel for what you should do. Start to line up your wheels, just build it in. I know it takes time, I know it's a big effort, but do it the best you can. Do determine your seeding method, rotation and weed control afterwards. Think a lot about that before you actually get right into it. Apart from putting lime on, still do that anyway. Be aware of that deep remnant compaction. And Paul's come up with this little one-liner, which is really ideal. It's fix the top, line things up, and fix the bottom. So by that he means fix the top 30 centimetres, sort that out, do your best at lining up your wheels as best as you possibly can, and then fix the bottom. In other words, take out deeper compaction. That will obviously depend on where you sit in the world. Obviously in lower rainfall you might put up with that deeper compaction because it's not such a big deal given the yield potentials, but we've still got a lot of yield that we can get out of this. So I'd love to acknowledge the GRDC for their support through the soil water repellents projects, and prior to that Numi's weeds projects and the subsoil constraints project, and also there's a Levy GRDC project who through Precision Soil Tech paid for the sampling. Bob and Murray Preston are the growers, and Murray came out in 2007 when we were ploughing and said, I hope far out, he didn't quite use that word, but he said far out, I hope this doesn't work. And last year when just after we'd harvested the trial with the plot seeder, he was hanging out his window in the car and I was talking to him about the difference in yield that we'd seen, and he was just quiet, really, really quiet, and he was just shaking his head. So I think his words came back to haunt him a bit. And just a point, 2015 is the International Year of Soils. Personally, I love them, and let's all promote them as best we can. Thank you.